Hi, Clutter Fairy fans. Welcome to the Clutter Fairy Weekly for September 1st, 2020. I'm your co-host, Ed Gumnick, and I'm speaking with Gayle Goddard, professional organizer and owner of the Clutter Fairy in Houston, Texas.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our weekly webcast and podcast where we talk about all things organizing. And this week, we're going to talk about sort of a philosophy about organizing. So that'll be a new twist for us. We are so happy that you're here, and we really appreciate that you jump in and make all kinds of comments on all of our channels, and so that our social media channels, so that we know what you want to talk about, and that's part of why we're going here today.
If you're joining us in Zoom for the first time, you can share your comments and questions through the chat, and I'll try to make sure Gayle gets to them before we move on. You can use the raise hand feature if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment yourself via audio or video, and I will share your video and turn on your microphone. We're also streaming the webcast live on Facebook, so you can give us your questions and comments there, and I'll relay them to Gayle. And during the webcast every Tuesday, you can talk to us directly by calling 669-900-6833. Use meeting ID 993-419-863 to join the meeting. In the course of preparing for our webcasts, I spend a lot of time exploring the web, looking for interesting outlooks and expert opinions on topics of clutter, organizing, productivity, and all sorts of related things. Recently, I ran across a blog called The Happy Philosopher, which identifies itself as a guide to freedom and happiness. Freedom and happiness are at the heart of the Clutter Fairy motto, clear your clutter, love your life. We've talked often about getting free of the things that don't support you in order to make space in your life and your home for activities, experiences, and things that will make you happy. The first post I read on the Happy Philosopher blog was about the writer's journey to eliminate clutter. He talked about using Marie Kondo's method of evaluating whether each thing he was considering sparked joy. As he looked back on the process, he reflected that he might not have been working from the, quote, proper definition of joy, end quote. He suggested the idea that decluttering isn't so much a method as a philosophy or a way of life. And he concluded with what I thought was a very thought-provoking quotation. He said, "All diets fail unless we change our fundamental relationship with food. All exercise regimens fail unless we change our fundamental relationship with movement and activity. Decluttering will fail too unless we change our relationship with stuff." This idea of a philosophy of decluttering became the inspiration for our next several webcasts. We're calling the series A Decluttering Philosophy, Changing Our Relationship to Stuff. Over the next few weeks, we're going to examine our relationships with stuff from several different angles: positive and negative emotions, habits and behaviors, and ethical and social questions. And throughout the series, we're going to focus on awareness of the components of our relationships with stuff. At the end of the series, we'll talk about practical approaches to bring our spaces into better alignment with who we are and the lives we want to live.
So we're going to talk today about identifying the guiding principles for your own personal philosophy of decluttering. But we should start off by saying that we're not suggesting that you have to rethink your life from the ground up. A key element of the Clutter Fairy approach to organizing is the idea that the clutter in your life doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. You aren't wrong. You just have some stuff that doesn't help you live the life you want to be living. In fact, as we were talking about this topic, we agree that we want to avoid the word wrong as much as we possibly can. Our focus isn't on wrong or right. It's about what works for you and what doesn't, and what supports your life and what doesn't. What we are suggesting is that all of us can benefit from taking a little time to reflect on the kind of life that you want to have. We want you to feel a sense of clarity as you clear your clutter. We think your decluttering process should be guided by your own proper definition of joy, your own definition of a good life. This relates back to the idea that we talked about the new year, the notion of editing the story that you tell about yourself in order to work towards a different vision. We're suggesting a similar activity here. We want to encourage you to spend some time reflecting and then writing down, or sketch or collage or express in any way that makes sense to you, a story or a picture of the life that you want to be living. This might be your own personal manifesto, a way of expressing this is who I am and what I want. So what are some of the components to reflect on? You might start with these. Think about your values, the things that you consider important, which might include your roles, in other words, your career or your place in a family or your relationships, your goals and priorities, what you want to accomplish in life, your principles, your religious, your spiritual, your ethical beliefs, your gifts and talents. What are you good at? What do you have to offer to the world? Your tastes and preference. What do you find important? What do you find soothing? What do you find appealing? Sit for a few minutes and think about these concepts and jot down whatever rises to the top of your mind. As you reflect, you can think about your answers to questions like these. What does a good life mean to you? What's the first thing you would like to add to your life right now? This is a good one. What's the first thing you would stop doing if you could? What makes you feel fulfilled? For me, the answer to that question is super easy. I feel very fulfilled when I am doing organizing work with clients. That to me is very fulfilling. Other people, it makes their head explode. This is why we're all different, right? So another question is, what do you care about? And why do you care about it? What brings you joy? The question of what sparks joy for you is the basis for the popular Marie Kondo method of decluttering. She had a very successful book, and basically what sparks joy, does this spark joy, is her one and only question for evaluating things as you go through the process of decluttering. She sets that simple standard, does this thing bring you joy? But we think that life is more complex than that. And so her method might be a little bit of an oversimplification for some people. There are things that bring you joy, and there are things that merely serve a function or provide simple satisfaction or meet some other requirement that you've set. Marie's method is certainly on the right track because you should be asking yourself questions, but there are more questions to ask than just that one. So we're going to give you a few more. What brings you satisfaction? What gives you a sense of purpose? What is your definition of comfort? And surprisingly, it's very different from all of your friends, I'm sure. What do you find beautiful? What do you find inspiring? What do you consider a good use of your time? How would you like to make a difference? These are philosophical questions, but we want to encourage you to think about them because they relate to the choices you make as you design and create your environment and fill it with things. So we want to give you the opportunity to chime in here and see if you have any questions related to this topic. It's a little bit more of a philosophical bent than we normally do, so we want to make sure that we're keeping up, looping everybody in here to the conversation.
Gayle, Leslie, who's watching on Facebook, said too many things spark joy, and I think that is an issue for a lot of people. I think that's one of the two biggest complaints with Marie Kondo's method, I think, are too many things spark joy, or I have things that I have to keep that don't spark joy because they're useful. They're just, some things are just useful and they don't spark joy. Do I keep
toilet
them?
Paper.
Yeah, sure.
Right? Well, and I think that people who are creative, and we've had this conversation, people who are creative that see the potential in all things, oftentimes their first response to anything is, ooh, this is super cool. It sparks joy just because you immediately see the cool potential for whatever is in front of you. And if too many things spark joy, then you have to recognize that that is an insufficient philosophy and filter for deciding what stays. Because if everything sparks joy, or a whole lot of things spark joy, or too many things spark joy, then that has to be step one. A, does it spark joy? If the answer 9 times out of 10 is yes, then you have to go on to a subset of questions, right? You have to have an additional, okay, so it passed the first test, it sparks joy. That keeps 90% of my contents. Now, how can I filter it again? It may be enough for most people to go, yeah, if they're not super creative, or they have a lot of stuff in their life that they would rather not have, then does it spark joy might be a sufficient and complete first filter, and it would shunt a whole bunch of stuff off the train, basically. But if that's not good enough as a filter, then you can just think of that as step one, and then develop the filters beyond that work for you. Does that answer the question, I hope?
I think that does. Kathleen, who's with us in Zoom, asked the question that, does this contribute to the life I want to create? That phrase has helped a lot.
Right? I think that's a super important point of view. You may have a lot of stuff there that you're living with, but it's not doing anything to help you build towards what you want. Sometimes things just sort of anchor you in what you used to be. And I had an exchange this week with someone who has been watching the videos, and she finally went into the garage where there was a whole bunch of stuff left over from a divorce from 18 years ago. And she's been avoiding them because it was going to be super distressing. And sure enough, it was. She pulled some things out and worked on it. It was distressing. But that garage filled with stuff that distresses her is an anchor that is not letting her move on to her next life, to her next adventure. And so facing up to that, we hold on to stuff that doesn't serve us anymore and isn't part of our vision for the future. It's part of our attachment to the past, is an important step to moving on. And I'm hoping that she keeps working on it. She's chipping away at it, and I'm hoping that she is able to get far enough along that she feels like she conquered it.
Well, I think the joy standard is a tough one too, if you deal with mental health issues like depression or
oh my gosh, yes.
You know, when someone is dealing with depression, even subclinical depression, joy is a hard thing to come by, but you can't, you know, just throw away everything. Well, maybe you can throw away everything, but
then you regret it later.
The joy, yeah, and the joy standard just doesn't work that way. And then Deborah mentioned William Morris. Have we talked about William Morris?
That sounds familiar.
I think his standard is have nothing in your house that you do not know to be useful or believe to be beautiful.
Yes, we have talked about that. It's a good reminder, though. I mean, if it's not useful and it's not beautiful to you, then it's, you know, it's meeting a really low bar for why it's still in the house. So it's a, you know, it's a good, that's a good threshold to filter the easy stuff to throw out. Like if you can't even declare that it's beautiful and you can't declare that it's useful, then it really, you know, is it a keepsake, and then it goes out the door, right?
And Ginger said we wrote a vision statement a few years ago and tweak it occasionally.
For the family?
Yeah, she didn't say. Ginger, please feel free to elaborate on that for us.
Yeah.
And Ginger also said, Kondo goes into further explanation. Toilet paper sparks joy. Having no toilet paper would not be joyful.
That's true. We've all been there, right? That's so funny.
And April added, a lot of stuff doesn't spark joy, but I still have a hard time letting it go. I keep debating whether to sell or give away. I feel like nothing has that much value, and I'm not sure I want to take the time to find out. And that's part of, you know, part of the self-reflection process we're advocating is deciding which things are worth your time, not just which things are worth your space, but which things are worth your time.
How much time and attention do you want to spend to get that $5 out of that thing? Maybe you have better things that you would rather do, things that feel more important to you, and spending time trying to turn something into money isn't a priority after all. I mean, maybe it feels wasteful, but you can also change your point of view about that. If you, not that you are throwing money away, but you are making something possible for someone else down the line. If you give something away, even if you donate it or send it all to your local church or wherever, and you're giving it away and you don't know who's going to get it, you can still imagine that those things are going to benefit people down the road who don't have the money to buy it from you, but who will certainly be receiving a bounty by getting it. And so sometimes the money that you make from it is that you are putting largesse out into the world. You're gifting away your bounty and your plenty and your overflow to someone else who is in a moment of scarcity in their life, and that can be a good way to reap the reward from it, I guess is the way to say it. It doesn't always have to be monetary.
It can be satisfaction.
It can be satisfaction, and there are people for which spending all the time and money to get the money out of it is necessary because they need to do that for their own finances and their own life situation. I totally get it. So you get to evaluate it for what, that's why we're talking about examining your own values and your own needs and what's important to you as a philosophy, because what I would do with it won't be what you will do with it, won't be what Deborah does with it. I mean, we all are in a different position. And so you have to evaluate it from your point of view. And if you are hesitating about selling stuff and it seems like a hassle and a waste of time, or it seems like it's going to take a lot of time and not reap enough of a reward, then you've kind of got your answer. It's not really appropriate for you to spend the time to do it. Someone else, that $5, no matter how long it takes to get it, that $5 might be, they're putting the $5 in the kitty so they can buy something, do something, go somewhere, and that is totally worth their time. So it's completely up to you how you evaluate it. And I guess that's where I'm trying to say, nobody's doing it wrong, right? It isn't about being wrong or not doing the right thing. It's about being honest with yourself about what is important to you and what isn't important to you, and then making the stuff in your house reflect those choices, that you're the one that lives there and it's your stuff and it's your monetary situation, it's your life. And so you get to evaluate all of your things through that filter. And if you are listening to these webcasts and podcasts, it's because you feel like the stuff in your house is a problem. I mean, you've already declared, I'm at a threshold that I find to be difficult. I have too much stuff. And so how you get out from under that burden is totally up to you and totally built by what is important and valuable to you, is what we're trying to say here.
That sort of
lots of chatter going on.
Yeah. The Rejoice in Zoom asks, who owns the things in my living space? I think she's suggesting this as another question for self-reflection. She says, I was the only adult child able/willing to bring into my home things which belong to parents, grandparents, family, memorabilia, photos, letters, etc. I need to accept that I've chosen to own it. They're all my things now. Ah!
Somebody like that one.
I'm quoting her there.
Right? That is a very good point of view, and accepting that is real. Like the person is, if they've gone, they're not coming back for the stuff, right? So it is now yours.
And an important, I think part of what we're suggesting is the process of self-reflection can help you clarify when things have been imposed on you from the outside, and
versus that you want to make you've made a choice that you want them and you want to own them now.
Wolf on Facebook wanted to clarify, it's a common mistake about Marie Kondo. She actually says that things should spark joy or serve a purpose.
Okay, so toilet paper definitely serves a purpose,
Yeah,
even though it doesn't spark joy, right?
Well,
okay.
we're not, we're not ragging on Marie Kondo. We're just suggesting
expanding
for those for whom that particular method is, if it doesn't resonate with you,
it wasn't enough.
Yeah.
Some people find it a very fabulous filter, and they're able to go joy, not joy, and they separate the stuff and declutter, and they're happy. And some people find that, like someone suggested earlier, too much sparks joy, and that is an insufficient filter, and they keep too much that way. And so if that's true, you have to do some more filtering.
Yeah. Wolf also suggested, she said, I've also heard, would the best version of myself keep this?
Oh, that's a good one. I like that a lot. Would the best version of myself keep this? And I have to tell you, I've been in the position where I've thought, okay, I'm going to keep this. And then I'm walking away going, why? Why are you keeping that? Like, some part of you knows that it wasn't the best choice. And you got to roll with that, right? Like, sometimes you have to make a couple passes before you can finally let it go.
Yeah, the comments in Zoom are coming so fast, I can't even keep up.
That's awesome.
Connie says, as we get older, things that we held on to for just in case have become less likely. Plus, I don't want to leave so much behind. I don't want to leave so much behind for those who are left behind.
And isn't that true? Like, you don't even realize that this is an issue as a young person. You never think about that. And but it always comes home to roost when you are dealing with a parent or an elderly relative, where you're the one responsible for dismantling their life and their house after they're gone. And there's nothing like doing that process to teach you a lesson, for straight up in your face, don't leave this behind for your own family to deal with afterwards. It's every grown adult does some version of, my parents are gone, my uncle is gone, my brother is gone, and I'm the one that's left cleaning up the house. And if they've not done any work at all, it can be a huge task. And we've talked about that many times here. So the idea of recognizing that you can minimize their suffering by doing this work yourself while you're able is a great motivator, and it's a great point of view, and it's a great way to stay on task. And, my mother, when she moved from Dallas to North Carolina to be around the grandkids, she lived there for 14 years before she died. And she spent the whole time, she had the decorator come in and decorate the house, and he rejected a whole bunch of stuff that she brought with her from Dallas. Like, no, that's no. Like, the decorator told her no, and that was enough for her to let go of stuff. And then she and I started going through all kinds of things in the house. And by the time she had passed away, we had been through a ton of things. And the house was not stuffed. The house was down to the things that she liked and the things that she was using. And it was, well sorted. And it still took me and my sister 11 days to get through it and make our decisions about what was going to stay and what was coming with me and what was donating, and to get it all boxed up and processed. And 11 days to do it, even though she had already filtered it, gives you an idea of how much time and effort goes into dismantling someone's home. If they haven't touched it, if you haven't done anything, when you are gone, they're going to have a huge amount of work. And lots of times they don't have that amount of time I'm self-employed, so I could take 11 days off and be up there and help Alicia work on it. If you don't have that kind of time, then what happens is it all gets boxed up and it gets shipped to you, or you bring it all in the car, you move the whole, the moving truck comes and it all goes to storage or whatever, and you basically punt the problem down the road and then pay storage fees to make that happen. So everything that you can deal with now is one less thing that somebody's going to have to move and deal with later. And sometimes that's the best last motivation for anyone.
Ginger answered our question and said that she and her husband put together the vision statement she mentioned, and then she inadvertently posted a bunch of it here in the chat, and she said, I didn't mean to post all of that, but I'm going to share just a few lines, just because I think it's a terrific example. Our vision for our home is warm and inviting and always company ready. People may drop by without notice, and we are relaxed and happy to invite them into our home. We have established routines and methods and supplies to maintain the order and cleanliness of our home with minimal effort. It is a joy to tend to our home. Every item in our home has its own designated space, and so on. Ooh. It goes into more detail than that, and it's about things serving us well and bringing us joy. Not too many, just enough. There's a lot more, but
I like the idea that that's a perfect idea of what we're kind of talking about here, which is figure out what's important to you. And I like that you looped your husband into the process so that he's on board with what you wrote as well, and that you guys sort of crafted that together as a shared vision for your relationship and your family. And that's wonderful. And how great to then you have a vision against which to measure everything that comes in, everything that goes out, and deciding what works for you. Does it fit with our vision for the family and for the home? And if it doesn't, then it makes the decision pretty easy, doesn't it? I think that's awesome. Yay, Ginger.
And Deborah offered some of hers too. She said, something I have used regularly is to ask myself, does this support my current goals? For example, my goal for living in an airy, bright, happy place, which is inviting to my guests and easy for me to live in.
Yes, and if it doesn't meet that goal, then you have to actively, if you decide to keep it against your goal, then you are actively deciding, okay, that's a goal, but I'm going to work backwards away from it instead of go towards it. And so it makes it really easy to see when you are in disservice to your own desires and when you are supporting yourself. And it's a very clean way of saying, I want an airy space. This does not support an airy space. Therefore, I am going to support myself and not have this around, which is awesome. That's really the self-awareness that we're talking about, like making those choices and deciding what is important and valuable to you, and then filtering it against those values, because we're all going to be coming from a different point of view. We're all living in a different space. We all have different resources. We all have different relationships with stuff. We've all inherited different amounts. And so everybody's going to need to filter it for what works for their family and their, desires in life.
Petra says, unfortunately, my husband thinks differently. Talking about not leaving the stuff for someone else to deal with. She says, unfortunately, my husband thinks differently. He says our nieces and nephews can work for their inheritance.
That's not the first time I've heard that, Petra. I have to say, sometimes people are like, yeah, whatever. They can deal with it. I don't care. And I'm always laughing about that. It's like, okay, if you want to pass the work down, awesome. But yeah, you might want to think about that.
It might not be the most compassionate choice.
It might not be the most compassionate choice. And I think that sometimes people are sort of like, it's their way of passing on hurt or disapproval or distress. Like, you didn't pay enough attention to me in life. Why should I make it easy for you on the back end? It's sort of, a little bit of pokiness. And so it makes me wonder, if you were to stop long enough and go, why am I willing to pass on what I know is going to be pain and suffering to someone else what's really the issue here? Well, maybe I feel like they don't pay attention to me, or they haven't earned my stuff and they shouldn't just get it for free, or maybe it's that this is a mask that prevents me from having to do it myself because it's going to be too big of a job. And so I think sometimes people just like, they know it's going to be a huge chore to do what we're suggesting, and they don't want to do that chore. They don't want to take it on. They don't want to deal with it. And so being funny about it and going, ha ha ha, they can, earn their inheritance is a way to say, and then implied, and I don't have to do anything, and I don't have to make any decisions, and I don't have to do any work. Okay. So maybe for him, the value is, I don't want to have to do all this work, and it's too hard. So then you may end up doing some work around him. And you may leave it, the nieces and nephews may have to come and deal with his stuff, and your stuff will be less of a chore, and you can have as much impact as you can have for them by dealing with your own stuff personally.
Well, Petra's comment also sort of surfaces another point, which is, to the extent that you're able, as you are reflecting on your personal decluttering philosophy, it's important to get the buy-in of the people you share your space with, at least the people who share the decision making. If there's a principle you're following that's deeply at odds with a principle that they're following, it's better that you should talk about that.
Yeah. And it may be that you live with somebody who is completely in a different place than you are about the stuff. The moving job that I'm doing, where the people have lived in the house for 50 years, the husband is the one who's very sentimental about the stuff, and she is not. And so for her, this process is a necessary evil. It's a lot of work, but it's not something that she finds too emotionally distressing. He, on the other hand, finds it very emotionally distressing and feels threatened all the time and feels like his stuff is being taken away from him. And so we have to constantly manage how we make sure that he's included and that he is part of all the decisions, and that he agrees that what we're letting go is okay to be let go, because I don't want him to feel like I've run over him with a tractor. Like, that's not my goal either, to force somebody down the road. But they have hired me because they are moving after 50 years. They have made a choice. They bought a house. They have a goal in mind, and the goal is to get into this house and live on the street with near their family members. And so I just keep trying to remind them, this is what you are wanting to do, and I know this is going to be painful, but this is why we're starting now, because we don't have to do it ripping off the Band-Aid. We don't have to amputate a leg to make this happen. We can go at whatever speed works for you to get through this stuff, and then you are not paying to move things that you don't need, and you're not taking things that won't fit into the house. And I think that for them in particular, because they've been there for so long, and their entire married life has been in this house practically, although they've lived several other places, but the last 50 years obviously in this place. And so that means they are watching their kids' lives and their young adult lives, and all their careers and everything is being opened back up and reflected back to them as we do this process. And so I can imagine it's a very challenging, confronting thing to sort of do the tour of your life's 50 greatest hits by looking at all this stuff, right? And I think it's been much more difficult for him than it has been for her. The point of that is that you may not be in the same place as your spouse, and you can't force someone along your ride. And so working on the things that are important for you and having a conversation with them to see if you can find some middle ground between you and not violating your partner's desires are the most important places to go, right? You can't take something away from them by force.
Right.
You wouldn't like it. You can't do it to them, but you can have a conversation, try to find middle ground, which is what we're doing with this couple. And we can work on, you can work on your own stuff personally.
Anya had a question I didn't want to skip over.
Okay.
She says, I have a home office with loads of materials, papers, books, etc., that I'll probably never use anymore. But trying to get rid of these feels hard. Normally, I don't have a problem with letting stuff go very much, but all my professional stuff, I seem to be unable to let go.
Right?
Maybe because I most probably won't get back to this profession ever, as I am not able to do it anymore. I have to avoid stressful work environments. All that stuff is sort of my life's achievement, and all books seem somehow to be really important and useful. I feel pretty confused about this. I feel a strong urge to purge, kind of breaking free and making room for something new.
Right.
Maybe it's mostly the uncertainty of my professional life in the future, because I can't be sure to go back to any job at all.
But I think that if you have already determined that you can't go back to this profession, it just means that that season of your career is over. It doesn't negate the season. It doesn't mean that you didn't achieve the things that you achieved while you were doing it. It just means that that season has closed for you. And so recognizing that when this transition happened for you so that you can't be in those stressful environments anymore, that sort of drew the big black line to, okay, I can't go back here, but I still wish I could, and I still value what I did, and I still enjoyed my life when I was doing it. And there were parts of that that were fulfilling to you and important to you. And so this is sort of a forced change of season for you, and coming to terms with this radical change in your lifestyle is part of this process. And so either you can face this stuff and say, I am going to purge it all. You can go at it and subtract all of it at once. And that's sort of the tear the Band-Aid off approach. Or if that feels intimidating, then you can go for the representative sample approach. Go through those things and recognize that for you, this career and the things that go with this career are now a keepsake. It has become a keepsake to you because you're not going back to it. And so keeping a representative sample of the stuff allows you to keep sort of the cream of the crop of all those books and all that paper and all that detail. And you can release the bulk of it and keep some real cool pieces of it. So maybe you can concentrate on taking that active life that is now, in reality, that active career has become a past time. It has become past tense for you. So taking the active work accoutrement and thinning it down to a keepsake level of accoutrement so that you have a slice of the pie that serves as the memory. So you're replacing this active work library with a keepsake version of that library that represents the change from I am actively pursuing this career to this career is now in my rearview mirror. And then you don't have to get 100% of it out of there, but try to get 75% of it out of there. And it's likely that there are very particular books that are your favorite reference materials or the most valuable or the best written, or I'm spitballing here, but the idea is that find the ones that are the most representative to you and keep those and let the rest go. And if the best that you can do is that you go in and you peel off 10% at once, if you can only peel it like an onion, and the first pass you take 10% out, and the second pass you take another 10% out, whatever method works for you is what I'm saying. But this is a perfect example of your life has changed. What is valuable and important for you now is dictated by your health and your well-being, and you can't go back to what you used to do. So keeping all of the reminders, support, keeping all of the tools and equipment that helped you do something that you can no longer do now is retaining stuff that doesn't support your life. Perfect example of what we're talking about today.
And Leslie said it's a death of that stage of life. So there's grief associated with that career, with loss of that career.
Exactly. There's always grief with transition, right? And there's nothing wrong with that you feel sad about something you lost, even if it feels like, sometimes people retire and they're like, oh, thank God, I was so sick of working. I was ready to retire. I'm so looking forward to all the fun I'm going to have. And yet they still have grief about the loss of their routine and the loss of, what has been keeping them motivated all these years. And any kind of transition is a little death of some kind. And so you get out of relationships, you walk away from people that don't serve you, you walk away from jobs that don't work, you get fired, you get divorced. Sometimes they happen because you choose it, sometimes they happen against your will. And those transitions always have a little grief in the background. No matter how excited you are about what's coming down the line, you still have to go through the little, okay, I'm letting go, and letting go has a grief that goes with it. And that's totally true.
Ginger added, my husband was always King Chunket, and I was Queen Keeps. I was Queen Keeps a lot. Our roles have reversed in the past few years. And somebody asked her how did that happen? And her answer was, as I've done more and more passes of decluttering, I've thought about how much is enough. And if I like it enough to keep it, I must use it or display it.
And so you've gotten better at creating filtering questions that really you feel comfortable with the results. It sounds to me like you guys have put a lot of time into thinking through those questions, and that you're getting better at it than he is. He's filtering, he's asking his questions and then keeping them. And I will say that usually, on the spectrum of getting rid of things, there are people on one end who keep everything. I'm sure if you listen to me all the time, you heard me say this. The people on the end of the spectrum that keep everything, and are out down at that end that are hoarders and clinically diagnosable hoarders, that's the extreme version, is they keep everything. And then the other extreme version is they throw away everything. And usually they're both stress responses. Even if you come up from the clinical diagnostic line and people just feel really uncomfortable letting go of things, and so they keep a whole lot more than they should, it's usually a stress response. Like, I have to make a decision here. Oh my gosh, what if I make a wrong decision? Therefore, I'm going to keep it all. And then the other person is like, this is a whole lot of work. I can't be bothered. I can't deal with this. It's too upsetting. It's too distracting. It's too whatever. The clutter bothers them so badly that their response is very, get it out of my face. And so they just indiscriminately throw everything away in order to clear the decks. And both of them have suffering on the other end. If you throw everything away, you inevitably throw away something important or valuable, or something that you regret. And if you keep everything, then you have the opposite problem. And so your husband may just be having an emotional response to, this is a lot of thinking and a lot of processing, and I'm having trouble keeping it all together. And therefore, I'm going to err against the side of caution, so that I don't throw away something important. And he's keeping too much for the moment. Y'all are really chatty today. I'm glad you're having a conversation.
Yeah, there's so much.
That's awesome.
And I wanted to share another example, and this was sort of on the topic of looking for balance as you're defining your own personal philosophy. And this was one that came to me from my partner, Jaime. He gave me the example of he's a real thrift shopper. He loves a bargain. And so he had set the magic number of $20 as the most he was willing to spend for any article of clothing or decoration, household item. There are big ticket items that he'll go more, and we'll usually talk about that, before he spends that money. But, you know,
Yeah.
he's always looking for that $20 threshold, and delights in coming home and telling me, look at this t-shirt, it was $3. But another of his values is he wants to buy American as much as he can. He wants to buy American made stuff, and not because he's stridently patriotic or anything, more a matter of to make sure it's, you know, supporting
Local
workers
economy.
local economy, and, you know, workers who are paid a fair wage if possible, and not exploiting sweatshop labor anywhere, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But those two values, I don't want to spend more than $20 and I want to buy American made, can come in, you know, can be at odds, because American made stuff tends to be more expensive.
Yeah.
And so, you know, each of us has to sort of pick our own most important principles.
Well, and what you've said to me about that before is that now he's prioritizing supporting the local economy over his $20 threshold, so that if he comes to a place where they don't intersect or agree, he tends to spend a little bit more money so that he can support the local economy. And so,
Exactly.
you know, he's evaluated which value is more important, one over the other, right? And so that's an example of examining what's important to you, and having your stuff be in alignment with those values.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
Let's see. So there's so many comments. We're never going to get to them all. Petra also mentioned on the Ginger's suggestion about displaying it. If I'm going to keep it, I'm going to just use or display it. And she said, not to bash my husband, but he has he has a lot of memorabilia in boxes that have been stored in the attic for at least 12 years.
Yeah.
And she's been making a point of displaying some of his things, and he likes it.
He likes seeing it, right?
Yeah. Talking about this with my sister, there's all kinds of stuff that my parents have held on to, and they've done a really good job about bringing things out and showing them to kids and grandkids as they visit, and saying, do you want this? You could have this. Or even stuff that they're still using and displaying in their home. They'll say, if you like that, I'm going to put your name on it so that when I'm gone, it's yours.
Yeah. Luckily, there's 6 of y'all, and so you can divvy their stuff up to a whole bunch of households.
Yeah. But the point that occurred to me as we were talking about that just the other day is the stuff that's in boxes, the stuff that's in a storage unit, as we've talked about, it's, you know, all right, so we're holding on to this because somebody has an idea that it has value. But wouldn't it be better if that value was in operation, like for someone who would use it or display it right now?
Yeah. Yeah. And we spin off into that whole collection thing about he's got his collectibles in the attic, and he's holding on to them because he feels like they have value, but he's also not enjoying them. And so it's sort of like he has a bank in the attic, and in the meantime, they're not safe up there, and they're being affected by weather and dust and bugs and whatever else is going on. It's not it's not a best way to retain the value of something that you store away in a corner and leave for forever. I think that deciding what to do with the things that are stashed, whether they're in an actual separate storage unit, or they're in the attic or the basement or the back of a closet or under the bed, those things that you've stashed because you think you need to keep them, are a prime landscape to figure out what's really the value around this, and what is my values around keeping this thing. Like, how do I want to intersect? Is it really worth the money for me to keep these stuff stored and pay a storage fee? Or is it really worth it to keep this stuff in the attic and have it be affected by temperature and nature and time, and nobody enjoy it, and they just stay up there in a box? And so evaluating what your value is around that, I think, would be really important. And I think a lot of times you'll discover that what's keeping them there is your perception of a value or a project that needs to be done that you don't actually want to do, or you don't want to reap the reward. Like, you don't want to do what it takes to realize the value, or you don't want to face the project or actually do the project even though you feel like you should. And so you stash the stuff that feels like it's making you feel guilty for some reason. And those are the things that end up in the attic and in the basement and in the closet. I should go through these things, but oh my God, it's going to be so much work. Let's just stuff them in the attic. And I have a client that has a whole bunch of, for a long time in her life, she collected little Disney figurines. And she went to a lot of trouble to collect them, and she has hundreds of them. And she's no longer into that hobby. She's a mature person, and you know, her kids are grown and gone, and it's not something that she finds entertaining anymore. But she isn't willing to face the whole collection, match them up with their original box, go through the process of trying to sell them. She doesn't feel comfortable donating them. She's got lots of money invested in them. And so it is a many knotted project with lots of angles and problems to it that she's just not willing to face the project. And so having it be out there waiting for her, her solution is to throw, I mean, we went and threw probably 200 boxes up into the attic. It's like, that's just a nightmare. And it's so, all I can think is, oh my God, one of her kids is going to have to take all these boxes down and find the figurine and match them up and do something with them when they're gone. And what a nightmare of a project to pass along or try to avoid. Right? And we all have those unfinished projects that are sitting out somewhere waiting for us to deal with them. And so part of your process is going to be going, okay, why am I paying? Why is that stuff in storage? Why do I think I have to keep it? And maybe re-examine whether it's worth your time or not.
Okay, we are running out of time. I'm going to ask you for final thoughts, but before I do that, I want to make a couple quick announcements. I want to remind anyone who is watching or listening live that our YouTube channel has more than 100 videos on a wide variety of organizing topics. You can find them by going to cfhou.com/YouTube. While you're there, subscribe to our channel and click the bell icon next to the subscribe button, and you'll get notifications when we post something new. I also want to mention again our Patreon page. If you want to write it down, it's cfhou.com/Patreon, Patreon. There you can pledge a little money every month to support our projects if you feel so inclined.
It's the clutter-free version of NPR.
Yes, exactly. We are not going to dedicate 2 whole weeks to a pledge drive. We're just going to mention it once in a while. I also want to remind everyone that our next webcast will be next Tuesday, September 8th at noon Central Time, live in Zoom and streaming on Facebook. We're going to go further into this philosophy of decluttering concept. We're going to be talking about emotions, the positive ones that can support the organizing process and the negative ones that interfere with our ability to declutter. Your final thoughts?
My final thoughts, the idea we're working towards is that living the life that you love is about living in a way that's true to your values and your principles, your beliefs, your aesthetics. There's been a lot of talk in recent years about authenticity, and that's kind of what we're talking about here. Your stuff should be authentic, which is to say, it should be a genuine expression of who you are, what you love, what you value, and what you want to be, have, and do. To live authentically requires a lot of self-awareness, which in the process of decluttering means taking a look at your life and your stuff to make sure that what you have is in line with who you are and what you value.
Well said.
That's my final thoughts.
Excellent. Okay, if you're watching this on YouTube, we'd love for you to join us live. To get notifications about upcoming events, we invite you to join our meetup group by visiting cfhou.com/meetup. I don't think it's possible to change the name of a meetup group, but please don't be deterred by the fact that it's called the Houston Clutter Coaching Meetup Group, because we've grown a bit beyond that.
We've been doing that for a long time. That was back when there was no video and a room full of people listening to me talk.
You can also follow us on Facebook by going to cfhou.com/Facebook, or subscribe to our mailing list by visiting cfhou.com/subscribe. We love to hear from you, so keep those questions and topic suggestions coming in the YouTube comments or on any of our channels. And you can always reach us through our website at clutterfairyhouston.com.
We really appreciate that you came here today. We're so glad that you come and listen to us talk, because clearly we always have too much to say about it. We're glad that you joined us, and I'm really super excited that you guys had a whole lot. I'll have to go back and read the chat later. I'm so excited you guys had so much to say to each other today. That's really exciting for me. So thank you. That's what we're hoping to create, a community where you guys support each other and everybody gets to go towards the goal that they want. Thanks so much. Love you. See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.